Hi, everyone, and welcome to Founder Wednesdays, a regular stream where we talk to fashion entrepreneurs and founders of direct-to-consumer brands about building sustainable, profitable, and stronger businesses. Today, I'm joined by Danute, the co-founder of the Knotty Ones, a sustainable knitwear brand that is ethically made by female artisans in rural areas of Lithuania. In this conversation, we talk about local manufacturing and working with artisans in Lithuania, diversity and representation in the fashion industry, and how you as a brand can reflect that from design processes to photo shoots and who you choose to show on your Instagram pages. Social commerce and how to stay authentic to yourself and build strong communities. And finally, fundraising during the pandemic and biases female founders face. So please tune in, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. Can you hear me okay?
I can. And you?
Perfect. Just fantastic.
Oh, that's
Thank
so
you
great.
for having me over. Very excited to chat.
Of course. Thank you so much for having the time. And I'm so happy that we're catching you while you are in Europe. I know that you've been spending and splitting your time between Europe and the US.
Yeah, I spend most of my time in New York, but I typically try to spend a month or a few months in Lithuania a year, and that's where the rest of my team is based.
Okay, that's great. Well, for everyone who is joining us, we have a special guest today. She's the co-founder of the Knotty Ones, the apparel knitwear brand that is all about sustainability, and it has a very interesting twist in terms of manufacturing. They work with women, specifically in rural areas in Lithuania, and and producing this beautiful knits with distinct design. So I'm really excited about this conversation today, and we will talk about a range of different questions. And for anyone who is joining us, we will have a time at the end to take a couple of questions. So please press the icon with a question mark and add your questions, and then we will have time to go through them. Well, thank you so much again for taking the time. I know what you're building is so super interesting, and you folks have been expanding and scaling the business very rapidly. But if we are to take a step back and go kind of to the roots, to the beginning of the story, tell me how did you end up starting the Knotty Ones? And I know that you have a very interesting story of doing it with your friends. So how did you turn that friendship into a business partnership?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. So I started the Knotty Ones with two of my really, really close friends, Sandra and Akvile, and we all met in grad school. We did the same master's degree in international business and marketing. Akvile and I we did our study abroad in South Korea as well. We shared our dorm room. Then we all were traveling around Southeast Asia. So, before we started the business, first and foremost, we were really close friends. And after we graduated, we kind of went on to do pretty different things, and we really went on those very different paths. Akvile, who's my fellow co-founder, she actually started a few other businesses and also went to law school. Sandra went to work in finance. She worked at Ernst & Young, one of the big four. And I, on my end, I worked in a whole bunch of different tech startups, mostly focusing on branding and marketing. And around 6 years ago, I moved to New York, and that's where I started working as a fashion editor / producer for a tech startup founded by Ashton Kutcher, who's like mostly known, I guess, as an actor, but he's actually also a really smart entrepreneur and an investor as well. So I was very fortunate to kind of learn from, him also firsthand what it means to build a brand. And then again, I worked at so many different startups. And then it just happened that, we're all three are Lithuanian natives. We happen to be in Lithuania. As good friends, we met up and we're, talking, and we were sort of reminiscing about our Southeast Asia travels, talking about countries like Bali, where they have so many cool brands. that are based on using the local crafts, but they're packaged in such a cool contemporary way that appeals to way wider audience. And then we started talking about how in Lithuania, we have such deep traditions of knitting, but the craft itself is just dying out because no one is making cool contemporary knits. You know, like fast fashion brands, sure, they made knits that maybe were crap and fell apart after washing, once, but they actually looked cool. In a sense, they were stylish, they were trendy, something you wanted to wear. Whereas this Lithuanian craft was just so old school, and we're kind of questioning why no one is making those, cool contemporary knits inspired by traditional local crafts. And, maybe only, after one too many mimosas, we kind of decided to make it ourselves. Well, none of us know how to knit, so not ourselves, but we basically dipped into our savings. We all put together, 800 euros each. Sandra's mom actually put a print ad in a local newspaper calling for knitters. A knitter answered. We sketched up some things, we wanted, to wear ourselves. And then a week later, we had our first sample, and the rest is history. Well, not really history, because, it's actually a lot of work that went into it. But yeah, it's been a very interesting process of starting a brand with my friends. I think retrospectively, I took that decision very lightly. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it again, but it's just, I was so excited about it. There are a lot of things I didn't consider. It definitely took some time to learn how to balance work and friendship. What do you do if, you're upset at your actual friend for, I don't know, stupid things, missing your birthday? Like, how don't you take that to your work environment? Or the other way around, what if you don't agree with a strategic decision, or you're like disappointed at something that they did? How do you, I can never pronounce the word, compartmentalize it and, and you don't carry it into your friendship. But then on the other hand, I think we were so fortunate enough to have this psychological safety, right? Because I know them so well. They're such close friends of mine. I'm not afraid to challenge them, to question them, and they do the same. So I think us constantly challenging each other has really led to great innovation throughout our entire history, and definitely contributed to, us being where we're at today.
Yeah, it is such an interesting story how you go from a friendship to, putting an ad and kind of like testing out this concept to building a brand that you have today. And I really wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the whole like friendship, partnership, and business partnership aspect, because that is something that we have discussed before with many founders as well, that of course founder relationship in its own sometimes is a challenge, right? How do you, especially when things are not going well, right? Or when you're facing some challenges. But are there any tips that you can share with founders with regards to, like what could make it work better, especially if they also have a personal relationship?
Yeah, I think, sorry, someone was calling me. I think one of a hint to that already.
Oh.
We were so fortunate that after grad, we all took extremely different career paths, and we all brought very different skill sets. So again, it's pure miracle that we all studied the same thing, but we ended up being, completely different people with completely different perspectives. Like, I tend to be way more creative. My co-founder, Sandra, is way more focused, on numbers and finance. So whereas I'm like, no, brand. She's like, no, numbers. So it really helps to balance things out. So again, if I could give one advice, if you want to start it or you're thinking of starting it with your friends, try to pick friends that have as different skill set as you do, so you could be very, very complementary to each other.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So it's really about putting the different pieces of the puzzle together and using the foundation of the relationship that you already have with them as a sort of the basic for building it up. Oh, I think we are losing you. Oh, you're back.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. That's technology, you know, it happens. Well, one of the things that you also already mentioned a little bit is that how neither of you has a previous experience in knitting, and you really went out to find those craftswomen, really, in Lithuania that could help you out with that. Could you tell me a little bit about why you decided to do that? Of course, it's understood that already, you know, the lack of experience in this field, but like, why Lithuania specifically, and how did you ended up with the model that you have today when you work with a lot of women, especially in rural areas? And just explain a little bit how it actually works in practice.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with why Lithuania. So all of us, you know, are Lithuanian natives, and I think even though we don't know how to knit ourselves, I think knitting in a sense is in our blood, in a sense that the craft of knitting in Lithuania is so important. It has been passed from generation to generation, and it's just, you know, everyone's grandma knows how to knit, and as kids, you know, we all wore knits made by our grandmas, and it's just like a thing that we, you know, hold so close to our hearts. So we did want to produce locally to celebrate that heritage. We never intended to produce in rural or marginalized areas. It happened very naturally. At first, when we were like, okay, we need knitters, how do we find them? We put on, as I said, Sandra's mom put an ad in a newspaper. And then all the knitters that responded, they were living in rural areas of Lithuania. So none of them were in the big cities. And we know at the beginning, we didn't think about it twice. It's just like, you know, it is what it is. It's not super convenient. It's fine. We'll figure it out. But very quickly, we discovered that pattern that, you know, in bigger cities, women had career opportunities. They had things to do. Whereas in rural areas, there's just nothing, you know. You can work at a supermarket, you can be a stay-at-home mom and just like take care of your kids, and that's about it. And those, I mean, especially like some rural areas in Lithuania, they can still be so macho in a sense that just the societal value system is so old school, where men are seen as breadwinners. And then women they're not financially independent. They don't really have a voice, you know, in their families or in their communities. And we realized that we were in a position to change that. And while we started doing that on a very small scale, as we were growing, we started seeing the impact that we were making. So again, you know, we never set out to do it. It just happened naturally. And as we realized what impact we started making it, we're like, okay, we're onto something. You know, purpose and profit can go hand in hand. So let's just do it. So that's how it happened. So today our production is sort of split into two branches. There's purely handmade. So we hire basically women. They're spread out everywhere. They knit from home. Once they complete a knit, they send it to our warehouse in PNA, which is a small town in Lithuania. And then we have our quality control manager and our head of production there, who basically check all the knits, make sure, you know, they're of great quality. And then on the other hand, I want to say like a year and a half, we started doing what we call semi-handmade knits, just to be able to scale. Because, you know, I'm wearing our Heartbreaker knit. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's purely handmade. It takes anywhere between 3 to 7 days to make just one piece. So it's definitely very time consuming. So for us to scale, we needed to find, you know, other ways to do it. So we started working with female-founded, family-run factories also in rural Lithuania. And we were very careful about the way we were auditing them, right? We wanted to make sure that women that work there, they get fair wages, they have paid sick leave, paid maternity leave, they don't slave around the clock. So those women operate knitting machines, and then all detailing is still done by hand. So there's a bit of both, still a bit of like, you know, hand making, still a bit of machine production. And this line really helped us scale our business. It comes, you know, it comes not as such a premium pricing, but still, you know, it's still for a very beautiful cause, and there are still real people behind it.
Yeah, I really love so many things about this. First is that you're making it in Lithuania, and it's definitely not a place that comes to a mind of a probably like a regular person as a destination for a fashion brand, right, in a way. But it's really great how you take and uplift that craftsmanship that has been around for generations, for decades in the country, through this empowerment movement and employing and giving the opportunities essentially to women to get some income, especially if there are limited options in terms of getting paid. I think there are so many different aspects of it, and one thing that I really admire is the way how you went about scaling it. So it's not just, hey, let's move the production somewhere else, maybe somewhere cheaper or somewhere more automated, but still sticking to the roots of the brand itself, right? The way you started, but just like taking it a notch and optimizing it a little bit more. Right. Do you see any further changes that you feel that you will have to make in the manufacturing once the brand starts scaling even more and the volume start growing?
I think maybe like, you know, if I had to dream really, really big, you know, 5 years from now, if we're huge, this is a concept that, you know, can be taken and copy pasted anywhere to support marginalized communities, anywhere. It doesn't need to be Lithuania. But I think as for now, we're pretty set on Lithuania. There's so many, you know, really female-founded, family-run factories that we have really close relationship with. We know all knitters working at factories. You know, we know their lives. We know, you know, we know what their husbands do. We know where their kids are studying. We know their lives. So I think as for now, we're set to focus on Lithuania.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is very interesting that often when we talk about sustainability in fashion, which is obviously a huge topic these days, we focus so much on the production side, but more from the perspective of fabrics we use and is it organic cotton or not and so on. But there has to be so much more emphasis on who is actually manufacturing those items. And one thing that I have seen is it's like as a trend, I guess, from a lot of brands that I spoke to, that they are trying to bring the manufacturing closer to where the brand is based. And one of the things that they mention is that it's much easier to just go drop by the factory and kind of like know everyone by name and you know, grab coffee with them and so on. Do you see that trend also with other brands that you're talking to and in overall in the industry, that the production is coming closer to where the customers are at, where the brands are at?
It really depends. I'd say yes and no. I think that's something that a lot of smaller brands tend to do just because, well, I guess it's easier to keep, you know, track of things, and then it lets you produce maybe, you know, smaller quantities as you are scaling. But again, I think there's so many wonderful, you know, like if we take, I don't know, like India, for example, you know, like I'm sure like, I don't know, Bangladesh, it gets just bad rep because a lot of fast fashion companies produce there. But I'm sure there are so many wonderful factories as well, you know, that, you know, pay living wages. They care about, you know, people that, you know, work for them. So you just need to audit those factories and try, you know, put an effort into making those relationships.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think, yeah, but I wouldn't say, you know, that I've really seen this trend. I think it really goes both ways. It really depends on which stage the companies are at.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. One other thing that you mentioned also in your introduction is that the way you looked at knitwear, it's so like taking this sort of craftsmanship and adding the design part. And I would love to talk a little bit about the design process in the brand. So one thing that is very obvious is you folks have a very distinct design and the patterns that you use. So who designs that? How do you go about the new items? Yeah, how does that process look like?
Right. So I think one of the main things is that we did not release any collections. And that's a step we took very consciously. Instead of dropping new collections, we focus on individual pieces. I think there's so much pressure in the industry to, to release a new collection, keep it for 4 months, drop it, remove it entirely. And we kind of felt that it was, for us who were as a brand and what we believed in, and this beautiful craft of knitwear that we tried to celebrate, it just wouldn't do justice. For instance, this heartbreaker net as well, again, that I'm wearing, we really released it 3 years ago. It's still one of our top sellers. It's still on our web store. You can still get it today. So definitely no collections. But in terms of designs itself, we are really working with a wide range of designers. Some of them are up and coming Lithuanian talents, or some of them are globally. Right now, we're working with a designer who's based in New York. And she's focusing, her background is in biosustainability and in knitwear. And it's really cool. She's also originally from Puerto Rico. And for her, it's such an interesting experience as well to be working along of our knitters, that have also, again, those just knowledge of knitting passed from generation to generation, learn from our knitters, so they sort of learn from each other. But I think for us, it's also, we started looking at our, new hires in a more holistic way. Also, be it our designer or be it any new people that we hire. It's yes, we create opportunities for these women, for marginalized women in rural Lithuania, but there are so many opportunities that we can create for women within our business in general, women, especially women of color, right, who so often also get overlooked. So I think, again, for us, it really became about just giving this opportunity for women, giving them a chance to, a chance and a platform. Yeah. So that's sort of applied to our designs as well.
And I think there is something very beautiful about this mix and infusion of different cultures, right? Starting with design and the background that designers come from and their experiences, and then reflected in the knitwear that is produced by women in Lithuania. I think there is something very, very beautiful about that sort of combination in a way.
Right.
When it comes to the decision about having no collections and instead focusing on this timeless design, do you think that the designing process itself for designers is different from the traditional sort of cycle in the industry?
100%, because, obviously, as a designer that's releasing collections, there's very clear certain steps that you have to follow, right? Shapes, colors, what's going to be the it thing this upcoming season. Whereas for us, we approach it from slightly different angle, right? When we look at sketches, we think, will this still be relevant a year from now? Can we keep it, in our inventory 2 years from now? So when we release new pieces, we really look at it more from merchandising perspective. What else can we add to our inventory that we don't have? Be it cardigans with buttons, as an example. We don't have it, we should have it. But it's never like, oh, cardigans with buttons, that's a big thing this season, let's drop it.
Yeah. Do you look at it from the perspective of what you personally will be wearing? Or like putting yourself in the shoes of your customers?
Yes. Well, we try to do both, but I think, just at the very core of the brand, when Sandra, Akvile, and I, when we started the company, really wanted to create something that we would wear ourselves. So, you know, now women, you know, us being in our early 30s, you know, what are the knits that we would wear or our friends would wear? And I think because we add this everything feels so personal, it kind of translates to our customers as well, and they like it because it feels personal.
Yeah, of course. Diversity and inclusion is something that you already touched upon a little bit throughout this conversation. Obviously, through having sort of inclusion in mind when hiring designers and through the manufacturing process that you have. But the other aspect of it is, of course, you and your co-founders. You are female entrepreneurs in this industry that we all know has huge problems with representation. So how has your experience been, and have you felt any difference about building this business?
Right, that's a great question. So just recently we went through raising capital. So last November we closed our first investment. We raised €500,000 in seed funding. So raising as three females definitely has been an exceptionally interesting experience, because for most of the time when we would rock up, well, dial in, because it was all in the world of COVID, you know, into our pitch meetings, there would be only men. And most of the times, the first reaction they would have after seeing us would be, "Oh, you're all girls."
Yeah.
And you know, you're here, you're ready to pitch, you know, you need that €500,000, and just hearing, "Oh, girls, what?" So it's definitely been interesting. And I wish I would have kept a running list of things we've been told while pitching. You know, I think like one of the most common questions while pitching, but also in general, is we get asked, people usually go, "So, you know, which one of you usually, like, you know, knits all the production?" And we're like, we all went to a business school. We don't know how to knit, you know? And I really doubt that male entrepreneurs running fashion companies ever get asked, you know, if they hand stitch their designs. So there are like so many, you know, little anecdotes. So I'd say in general, it can be more challenging to be a female entrepreneur, because you just constantly have to prove yourself at each and every step, because just the mindset is that, you know, maybe you're a girl, maybe, you know, you're not serious entrepreneur whatsoever.
Yeah, it is so interesting and upsetting at the same time how many similarities I see through my experience also as being a female entrepreneur in the tech industry, or like in the intersection of fashion and tech. And that was in a lot of cases my experience as well, coming to terms of you know, white men and saying like, "Oh, this is so cute that you're building here, little fashion tech project. That is so nice." Or for example, telling me that, you know, I don't know, I never shop online. I don't know what problem you're already solving. So it's always been interesting for me to see that how many similarities we have in these industries that are really underrepresented, especially when it comes to biases around fundraising.
Right. I think you just nailed it. Okay, so I had this story when we just closed our seed funding, and we raised €500,000. So, you know, it was like on some newspapers in Lithuania, and one of my classmates, someone I haven't spoken in 15 years, reached out to me, and she was like, "Oh, I saw the story in the newspaper. I'm not sure you remember me. It's so amazing. And it's such a cute little project that you were doing. Congratulations." And I'm like, I just raised freaking €500,000. It's not just like, you know, a little cute project. You know, we're building a business here. So I can really relate to that.
Yeah, I think there is definitely that bias about, especially women leaders, and especially in those sort of like what considered feminine or maybe not serious verticals like fashion. But if you look at it as an industry, it's a massive industry, right? But of course, this is just the way those biases represent themselves and manifest themselves. When it comes to fundraising, how has the company changed before the funding and after the funding? Because obviously, building a profitable and lifestyle business versus building a venture case is typically quite different. Can you share some experiences around like how that has changed your life as a leader of this company and the brand itself?
Yeah. So it's still been pretty recent. It's been 4 months now. I think, you know, from my personal experience, it's like the most interesting part was that for a very long time, we were, you know, even though we had a lot of knitters, at the core, we were just like 3 co-founders. And suddenly we have all these resources, we're hiring new people who are also so passionate about something that we built. And then they're growing with us. So in that sense, it's been such an interesting experience. And then it's kind of nice because for a very long time, you know, for us, it was really about surviving, right? It's like making sure that we keep the lights on, making sure we're profitable. But then also in some instances, we would have to sacrifice what we are as a brand, right? Like, let's say in fashion, obviously, and especially with knitwear, there are seasonalities. So in spring, like it's just natural, our sales tank. So then we would, you know, have these like crazy sales to make sure that we can get to the next season or can produce the next collection. Whereas now, you know, it's not as reactive. We can be proactive. We can plan things, and it's such a wonderful luxury to have.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that as a founder, just the peace of mind that it gives you, that you don't need to, you know, focus on surviving, but you can actually focus on developing the company. I heard this phrase on one of the podcasts that I've listened some time ago, that as a founder, we always want to be hungry but not starving. So have that passion and being hungry for more, but not being always at the brink of sort of like, you know, falling apart in a sense.
I love that.
Yeah. We talked a lot about fundraising and sort of like scaling businesses on these IG live sessions. And is there anything that you can share, maybe some tips or advice with regards to how to get the company sort of up and running at first and reaching that first profitability? Because I know that for a lot of founders who are building their businesses, that's the #1 goal.
Right. That's a huge question. That's a very big question. I think, you know, we've been throughout the entire history before we got the investment, we're incredibly resourceful, and we were never afraid to ask for favors, and we're never afraid to ask for help, and we're never afraid to reach out to people who were out of reach. As an example could be, we definitely work with a lot of influencers, and especially, you know, pre-investment, we didn't have any budgets for that. All we can offer is a knit. And maybe you can also support, you know, this beautiful cause. And it's just insane how many really big bloggers, you know, influencers with like 1 or even like 2 million followers would be like, yeah, sure, send us your knit. We'll gladly tell your story to my followers. So I think it's just really, what really helped us was being resourceful and asking for that help.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. And I think it's often as founders, we just take so much on ourselves just to make sure that everything works, you know, according to the plan. So sometimes I guess it's hard to go out and ask for help, but this is a beautiful advice. And I think for any founder, go do that. Reach out to your network, reach out to your supporters, to those people who are cheering for you. You talked a little bit about influencers, and I wanted to move on to the topic of social commerce. But before we do that, for anyone who is joining us now, we will have time, probably in approximately 10 to 15 minutes, to take a couple of questions. So if you have any questions, please tap on icon with a question mark, type your question, and then we will go through that. So social commerce. You right now, the Knotty Ones, the Instagram profile is quite successful. You guys have several thousand followers. How did you start that, and how did you get from 0 to 1,000?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think like right now we have 28,000 followers, and in my head that's still so little, and it's just like there's such a long way to go. But I think, you know, what helped us get this far has been the fact that we don't really use our social handles to sell products. You know, we're not pushing our knitwear every single day. It's really more about telling stories and building our community. And we've been really focusing on building that community. I think a lot of, you know, for us as a brand, you know, I guess, you know, the Knotty Ones, it kind of suggests that we already, you know, suggests that we don't take ourselves too seriously. So our tone doesn't as well. Like, we admit that we make mistakes, like we don't know everything. We're here learning with everyone. And I think that really resonated with our community. You know, when we were releasing new samples and we're not sure about sustainable yarns, there were people giving us suggestions on what kind of certifications we should look at. Or it's the same thing. I think, you know, one of the most successful Instagram posts we ever had was when we did a shoot with a woman who's she was in her mid-60s, I want to say. And we posted those campaign photos on our Instagram account. But instead of focusing on our knits, we kind of talked about ageism in the industry, and especially in fashion. And we kind of admitted that ourselves for a very long time just used, you know, very skinny white girls in their 20s as our models, which is pretty toxic. But we kind of lived up to that. And you know, like, our audience now really holds us accountable to that. Mm-hmm. So when we have these realizations, they celebrate it with us. When we use like models that are too skinny, they call us out, and we have this very open conversation. So it's a very dynamic process, and I think that's what's really been working for us. And one more thing, I think in general, what we do on our social handle, we also like to tell those backstage stories, and we like to tell stories of our knitters, like personal stories of who they are as human beings. And I don't think any other brands really do that. So every single knit that you order comes signed by a woman who made it. So, you know, when you get our knit, we want you to take it and be like, oh, this was made, you know, by knitter Aldana. She lives with her husband, who she, you know, he was her high school sweetheart, and they have 2 dogs. You know, we want to feel like you know the person who made that knit for you. And that has been really working on our social handles as well. When people, you know, we would post someone's story and people be like, oh, that's my knitter, oh, that's amazing, you know, say hi, send my greetings. So yeah, community.
Yeah, and it's so powerful, because essentially you're bridging that gap that exists today. Because I'm wearing this sweatshirt, I have no idea who made it. I don't even know where it was made, right? And I think that creates that gap between our perception of what goes into producing items, and it's very easy with that go towards, you know, fast fashion and going cheaper items without caring of how they were produced or how much people who produced it were paid and so on. So it's a really powerful message in itself, that you are actually showing those stories and you're bridging that gap. And it is really interesting how you talk about the community that you know, they hold you accountable and they call you out when you do something that they don't like. How do you make sure that this still stays productive and it doesn't become toxic in itself?
That's a great question. I think like as a brand, we still have a very clear agenda, and we have our beliefs and things that we stand for, right? Like we have our style, we have our look, but at the same time, we want to hear and we want to learn. So I don't think so far we ever felt that it's becoming toxic. I think quite the opposite. It's just there's so much inspiration and ideas that are coming directly from our consumers. So we are here to listen.
Yeah. Are there any practical tools and advice that you can share with founders who are maybe starting their journey and they're just getting onto social with their brands? How can they craft that relationship with their communities, and how can they tell those stories in an authentic way?
Yeah, I think we've been so lucky that when we started our brand, we didn't try to, you know, to pull all these kind of like, you know, have a brand and then be like, oh, you know what, but we need to engage with our community. We need to talk about all these topics. Now, like, let's try and drag these topics, you know, into our social handles whatsoever. I think for us, it really came organically from who we are as three founders. We have strong beliefs. Again, as I said, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We like to admit our mistakes. There's nothing wrong with that. We're very transparent. We're open. So our personality really translated into that, even though, you know, now we moved away from it. There are like other people handling it within our team, but still this really came from the very core of what we were building as a brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I mean, of course, given that you're a team with such a strong story, your personal story of friendship, the story of the way you build the brand is really more about building up on top of it rather than changing and pretending to be something else.
Right. I think there's so many brands out there that they look all exactly this, like either they all look exactly the same, or then there's another problem with, well, at least that's what I see as a problem with a lot of sustainable brands, that they become too preachy and then they know it all. And that's the only way we're supposed to do it. I mean, we're all humans, like, and especially, you know, in the topic of sustainability, there's no one truth. You know, you just kind of have to pick between, you know, evils. No, you really do. And so, yeah, I think it becomes just like so unauthentic when brands pretend that they know it all and they become super woke and preachy. So as a consumer, I always feel like, you know, you can't make any mistakes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually have seen, like, even in these conversations, we had conversation with some brands that have utilized that community aspect so interestingly to build their business and to scale it. Like, for example, of running crowdfunding campaigns to get a sense of what their customers actually want, or doing this sort of like more sophisticated feedback campaigns where they're asking customers a lot of questions and then based on that build new collections or build new products and so on. So I think there is definitely a lot of power in that community. And I even heard somewhere that, you know, the sort of like the 2020s in e-commerce is going to be all around the community commerce and social commerce aspects.
Right.
Yeah. We will be moving on to a couple of questions in about 5 minutes or so. So again, for anyone who has a question, please tap the icon with a question mark and send it there. But while we are staying on the social commerce topic and kind of intersection of that and diversity, you already mentioned a little bit about the sort of that most popular Instagram post that you had with a woman and talking about ageism in the industry. And that, of course, being a Lithuanian brand, it's mainly white and blonde and sort of like young women. How do you practically go about making sure that the representation is actually there in the image of the brand?
Right. It's a great question. And so most of our shoots happen in Lithuania. Now we're trying to come up with a way to sort of move a chunk of them to New York. Again, just because of diversity of models in Lithuania. As you said, it's extremely, extremely hard. Even when you go to the main agencies, modeling agencies in Lithuania, 99% of models that they have in their books is just white, super skinny girls. So there is no diversity in terms of, you know, skin color, age, abilities, anything like that. So it's definitely a very interesting process. We actually spend a lot of our time on Instagram, just kind of like, you know, headhunting people, being like, oh, have you seen this girl? Like, she has such a cool edgy look. We should reach out.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is really difficult because even though some women might have very interesting looks, but they don't necessarily have modeling experience. And, you know, throughout the years, I learned to, you know, I really realized that modeling is such a hard job. It's also, you know, it's a skill and not everyone has it. So sometimes you can have the looks, but no skill. So it's, again, it's definitely been extremely challenging. We actually have a shoot in 2 weeks, and we're casting now, and it's so difficult, again, because the market is so small, and I feel like at this point we already used every single diverse model we could find, so our pool is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah. One would argue that being still a sort of like a small brand and you know, just raising your first investment round, why focus on it so much?
I think it's just, again, a lot of you know, a lot of what this brand is really comes from our personal beliefs, you know, what we believe as founders. So it was the same with, you know, hiring knitters. We never questioned if they should get fair wages. It was obvious. They have to, you know? Yeah, sure, there are other brands that, you know, they don't even pay living wages, but if we are running a business, that's how we're going to do it. And I think it's the same with diversity. For us, it's a very important topic. We want to be inclusive. We want other people to feel inclusive. So again, this goes, be it our models or the people that we are hiring, we want to make sure that they're inclusive.
Yeah, I love it so much. And I think it's, you know, we always talk about how as founders, we shape the culture and sort of like how the company will evolve. And I'm so happy to see that you and then the co-founders of the brand, you are so, first of all, diligent about sticking to those sort of principles and morals that you started this brand with, and just like, you know, building it in a way that you want this brand to be like. You want to be proud of it. You don't want to compromise on your beliefs and principles. I think this is, it's so great. And I really feel that as founders, that's sometimes it's a hard thing to do, but it's also so important to see brands like that actually thriving and building it in this way.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I think we will open up the floor now for questions. So again, if anyone has questions, please feel free to send it. So the first question we have is, are your products also popular among customers in Lithuania, and why?
Fantastic question. So right now we export 96% outside of Lithuania. So we never focused on Lithuania as our core market. To be very transparent, we never really considered it because of purchasing power. Our knits typically, you know, if we're talking about sweaters, they come in a range of, you know, 200 to 150 euros. So we never really focused on it, but I think Lithuanians in general love those Lithuanian success stories. And I think at this point, we've been really successful outside of Lithuania. So there's definitely been buzz within the country around us. And then suddenly once, every Lithuanian wants one of our knits because they're proud of, what we are representing and the cultural heritage as well that we are celebrating.
Yeah, I guess it's a very similar sentiment to Gani and Denmark. So as soon as Gani started becoming this popular brand outside of Denmark, I think there's that certain pride that Danes take in wearing Gani outside and inside the country as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. Another question, I guess it's connected. Which countries do you have the highest sales?
Currently the US and then the UK. I think our focus for this upcoming summer will definitely be Australia and New Zealand. At this moment, again, we're trying to balance out our sales. So the season change is always difficult. So we definitely want to focus this summer more on Australia and New Zealand. We kind of started tapping into that market last year, but really want to scale it up this year.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next question. You have recently expanded to kidswear. How did that transition look like?
I think this one of those things that also came from our community where people kept asking for it, oh, do you guys make, anything for kids? And then it kind of just like natural, like, you know what, we never tried it, let's do that. It's definitely been a very interesting process. Sandra is one of our co-founders. Son had to be our model. Poor guy, we tortured him so much, making him wear and try every single item we make. But it's been a very interesting process so far. And I think for us, from a business side, we reached and tapped into this different audience where now we're also have moms shopping for outfits for themselves and maybe for their kids as well. Sort of like matchy look. So yeah, it's been great so far.
That's good. That's good to hear. I think it's always challenging to expand to new vertical, and it's not just a new product category, it's actually a completely different group of customers in a way. But I guess what you're mentioning, that moms are shopping for themselves and their kids, that actually makes sense. So next question, this one is actually I wanted to ask from myself, and this is really more about the direct-to-consumer aspect of your business. How do you think, what do you think about the shift of e-commerce towards direct-to-consumer that has happened during the pandemic? And how has that impacted your business and your strategy moving forward?
Right. So I think the shift was happening already, but the pandemic just like really accelerated it. I think on our end, we were so fortunate, but before pandemic started, 95% of our sales were happening online, and we decided we're going to focus on online. This is where we had, this is where it made the most sense for us from a business side. Our margins were the best. We didn't need to deal with, boots, like smaller boutiques and, cater all these like little, their questions, a million things happening. We were in full control and we had the best margins selling directly to consumer. So I'm actually very excited, that there, obviously there, the pandemic in general has been very, very difficult for the entire fashion industry. But I think for a lot of people who are maybe not as comfortable shopping for clothes online, this was the time to do it. So it was this extra kick that they needed. So I'm really interested to see where it goes. Whereas at the same time, I feel like people also are really craving for those real life experiences now, or once the pandemic is over. So I'm really interested to see where the market goes. But in general, I really think the direct to consumer businesses, this is the future, and the old model is slowly dying out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've also seen a lot of evidence of that on the market as well, with the huge emphasis on local and kind of getting closer to the communities maybe that you're a part of, especially when we were all in lockdowns and there are not that many choices and options, but also just buying things directly from brands that you like versus going to marketplaces or other sort of multi-brand retailers. There have been some very interesting research and stats that were shared by Shopify, specifically how they have seen the shift, especially happening on their platform with so many new brands coming to the platform, and in general, just customers spending more of their money buying directly from brands. And I think for me, like as working with so many brands, that has been really, really exciting to follow that, because I'm such a huge supporter of entrepreneurs, and it's just so amazing to see their businesses thriving. So anything direct to consumer, I'm such a big fan of.
Right.
We have one more question. I think this might be our last one. Do you have any ideas to extend your collection beyond sweaters in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So already we don't only make sweaters. That's, I'd say, our bread and butter. That's what we focus on the most, but we also have some different lines. So this fall we introduced pants. So especially, I think this was such a good COVID drop, sort of loungewear pants when you're staying at home. This summer, actually, in a month and a half, we will be launching some new products as well. We're launching shorts. We are launching knit bralettes. We're launching one product I'm really excited about. We're doing our own take on a classic white t-shirt, but a knit one. We're launching some crop tops, also some good alt sweaters. We also have a small accessory line, so knit socks, scarves. This upcoming fall we'll also have some beanies. So definitely, yes, we have some. We're launching some more.
So if it can be needed, then you can buy it on the Knotty Ones.
Exactly.
Perfect. One last question, and this one is very interesting. Where do your raw materials come from, and how do you make sure that it is sustainably sourced?
It's actually such a challenging part of business. So we work right now with yarn producers, not producers, sorry, like yarn suppliers that actually specialize in sourcing sustainable yarns. Because when you talk with so many suppliers, they just don't have full knowledge of their supply chain. They can't prove where the cotton or the wool came from. They don't have any certificates if it's like cruelty free, things like that. So it's definitely, if the pie of suppliers is like this, we can only work with like a small proportion of suppliers. So it definitely reduces, the amount of, let's say, yarns that we have access to, but at least we are very comfortable that, we know where this came from. We know that it's cruelty free. We know it's certified. We know where it was, dyed. We know who weaved it. We can actually trace those steps back, but even finding those suppliers has been such an extremely challenging part, and it really is. Every single time we are working on a new piece and we want to try maybe new yarns, it's just, yeah, it's tough.
I would say that it's an industry challenge. The transparency of the supply chain is just simply not there. And the more complex supply chains you're dealing with, the more complex the problem becomes. So it's really about untangling it. And I think just doing it even on one level of with yarn manufacturers, in a sense, yarn suppliers, I can imagine how challenging it is to find the ones that are up to the standard that you have.
Right. I often think, about brands who also say that their garments are ethically made, but they don't talk about their supply chain. So sure, you know that your workers got paid fairly, but what about people who pick cotton or, anyone on that supply chain?
Yeah,
it's really a big problem in the industry right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one last question that I have from my side is really what's the next thing for the brand? You spoke already about all the new exciting products that you'll be launching, but what else is coming?
I think, you know, for us, the biggest plan for the next year is just really focusing on growth and entering new markets, but also just really expanding where we are. We started last fall with 20 knitters that knitted for us full time, plus our factory partners. Right now, we're almost at 50. And it's so amazing to see that, you know, step by step we're growing and we are having bigger and bigger impact in those communities that really need support. So the goal is just, you know, the math is like, it's so simple. Like the more they grow, the more people actually benefit within those marginalized communities and the more people we can employ. So yeah, growth.
Yeah, it's so interesting for me every time when I have these IG Live sessions. I really take it as a sort of like a journey of discovering a brand and discovering what a founder stands for. And to me, the Knotty Ones, it really comes down to you know, a story of friendship and being transformed by this beautiful idea of empowerment and supporting the local community without compromising on the beliefs and the stance that you have with regards to fair wages, with regards to where you're making it and how you're making it. So it's really, really an interesting story, and I'm so thankful and I'm so grateful that you had the time to talk today to us and to join us and to share that story with all of us.
Thank you for having me. It's always really, really exciting to, you know, share my story. I think often I get sucked into, you know, everyday just, you know, business stuff. So it's really nice sometimes to stop and think about it like holistically and share that story and kind of like just reflect on the path that we went through as a brand throughout the last few years. So thank you for chatting.
Yes, of course, and best of luck with everything that you're building. And for everyone who joined us today, thank you so much for tuning in, for all the questions, all the love that you showed, and join us every Wednesday at 8 p.m. European time, where we talk to fashion entrepreneurs and founders of direct-to-consumer brands about building more sustainable, more profitable, stronger businesses. Thank you so much again, Danute, for the call. And yeah, and I encourage everyone to go and subscribe and follow the Knotty Ones. And I personally will be definitely following your journey.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, have a good one.
Talk soon. Bye.